Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another Coffee with Casey. Today, I have someone very special for you. I have Ms. Ruqayyah Ali. She's the senior manager at Disney for paid search. Ruqayyah, thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. I'm so excited for our conversations. And yeah, shall we get into it?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So excited to
Awesome.
be here.
Yeah, we'll keep it organic. We'll go through some questions. We may
Mhm.
go back and forth on some of these. Okay, first of all, I would love to hear it from the horse's mouth. I would love to hear your experience as you've gone through after Rollins, where you've been, what you've done. A bit of an intro for our audience members as well. If I could hear that, that'd be awesome.
Sure, absolutely. So I actually was at Rollins studying critical media and cultural studies. So not your typical undergrad degree that will get you into digital marketing. It's a little bit more in the weeds of culture and things like that. But I knew I wanted to do something digital, wanted to get out in the field and check out something, related to that field. I wasn't really aware of digital marketing at that time. So after Rollins, I did go into admission counseling, did a lot of work there, and then decided to pursue my master's degree with Full Sail. So when I was doing that, I ended up working for a company called Pearson, which many may be familiar with. The part of their business that does textbooks is very familiar to students in general. And I started working on digital marketing there. So I came into the door with very basic experience in digital media and started working on paid search and paid social campaigns. So those were really interesting and new, fun, a lot of content creation, a lot of application of that into, campaigns, and then really a part of it that I didn't even know existed, which was putting money behind those campaigns in order to reach a particular audience. So we're able to, drive awareness and meet the expectations of people looking for a particular product or a particular, something to do, a particular program, that kind of thing. During my time at Pearson, we worked on higher education programs. So I worked on marketing those to prospective students. It was a little bit different than what some people might consider traditional digital marketing, just because it has a long lead time for students. So you are marketing to them, but you do not necessarily know at what point they will decide to take the plunge and want to enroll in a program. So it's a
Let
little
me
bit
quickly interrupt you there. What was the product you were selling?
the program itself. So enroll in business, whether it was an MBA or an RN to BSN, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
It was basically getting enrollments from those students to say, hey, we have a program for this particular university. Come join us, that kind of stuff.
What was your average lead to close time normally?
About a year to a year and a half.
Oh my goodness,
Yes.
that is long.
It is very, very long. And there was a lot of retention issues, just things of like people fall off during that time, or they might find a different program, or they might, decide, well, I don't really want to go to school at all. I would like to do something
Yeah.
else. So it was very interesting to see how that would progress. Just
Off the
because
top of your head, do you happen to know what their CAC, their customer acquisition cost was like? If it's that long of a lead time?
a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. It was definitely in the thousands.
For
Yeah,
one customer.
correct. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a really ongoing, interesting experience because just spending money to that point in order to, I know you're going to eventually, close this deal and you're going to get a student's going to likely end up spending what, $100,000 on a degree, right? But in order to achieve that, just with such a long lead time, putting in tens of thousands of dollars and, having that, for a cost per lead just in the thousands was just crazy. At least to me, I thought so. But I know every business is different. Everyone has their things that they want to do. So,
Of course. And you have to be in business for such a long time to be able to be confident in
yes,
spending that much money
correct.
before closing. Otherwise, I mean, imagine a smaller first timer firm
Right.
doing, there's no way they would spend that kind of money at all.
No, no. It was a very eye opening into the industry of higher education and just how much funding is actually available to market to students to bring them forward. And I thought that was just wild, honestly. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's all.
And from there, after that, I did stay at Pearson for about 3.5 years and climbed the ranks in the team. Met some really, really awesome marketers and great friends there. And then wanted to explore something a little bit different. I had never worked at an ad agency, which is usually where a lot of people start when they're working in digital marketing. I decided to move to New York for that, which was fun and interesting and a little bit crazy because COVID hit about 1 month after I moved to New York City. So I worked for a year and a half with the team, but I did not meet the majority of them. So a lot of it was virtual, which was always interesting. But there I changed course a little bit. I worked on consumer packaged goods products, which is very different. So my client was, they were called Henkel, and they have brands like All, Borax, Schwarzkopf hair color, a lot of different things in terms of like the home products business. Very different, much shorter lead times, lots of more cost efficient as far as yes, we were still investing millions into marketing these products, but they're consumer packaged goods, so they were moving off the shelf a lot faster. The costs were very much more efficient, very very low in terms of like the that return. We would get high return for low cost, which would work out really well. The other thing that I dabbled into, which was new for me, was e-commerce. So shopper marketing. So these were product listing ads on Google. So these are different than traditional ads where you're actually showcasing a price and a product. And then also some more smaller business with quotes around it. Marketing for, businesses like Target or Kroger, where you're actually featuring those products on their own website. So there are certain things that you can do. It's very old school. So for someone who at that point had been working in paid search for about 4 years, those platforms are not as automated as using Google Ads. So you're basically doing all manually. You're setting bids manually. You're doing those kinds of things. That was very, very interesting to see because it's such a big business, because so many people go directly to a consumer's website in order to look for the product they're trying to buy. Mm-hmm. So dabbled in e-commerce there, super interesting. And I was super fortunate. One day, Disney reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like a job?" And I said, "Absolutely, it's my dream." So I moved back to Florida and joined the team last year in April. So I've been at Disney for almost a year now. I joined the team as a customer manager too. And essentially what that is we work with customer engagement. So our goal of our team is to engage users, from upper funnel. So people who maybe have no idea what they want to do from like a vacation standpoint, things like that. Tell them about Disney, bring them into the fold, all the way down to lower funnel levels where people who are diehard Disney fans, they know they want to go to Disney. We are serving them ads at all various levels of the funnel, right? So we're doing a lot of discovery marketing with non-branded keywords where we're able to reach them, people looking for vacations. We're also able to be mid-funnel, reach them by things like Disney Vacation, where they don't necessarily know what they want to do with Disney, but they know they want to come to us in some way. And then lower funnel, looking at people who are specifically looking for Disney Cruise Line or Disneyland Resort, people who absolutely know they're going to buy tickets, they're going to go to this place. It's really interesting and really cool from a marketing perspective. Naturally, as Disney, we have lots of funding to invest in this, which is great. But this was also another eye-opener for me within the travel industry, because Disney has certain trademarks, registered and protected and things like that. It's very, very cost efficient, and lead time is almost instantaneous. So whether you're doing lead generation, whether you're doing revenue generation, people are clicking through to the site and typically making that purchase or signing up right away, which is really interesting.
So, quick question.
Sure.
In the lower funnels, mm-hmm. when they're already searching Disneyland, why would you want to spend money on that? You've almost already covered that.
That is great. That is a great question. So one of the reasons that we would do that in paid search, so typically you're running branded search at that point. So you're only, say for Disneyland Resort, you're running, those keywords. Those are people who are searching for it. They know they want to go to Disney, but they are looking for a reliable source from where to purchase their tickets, right? So we're running paid search in order to show them a disney.go.com website, which is our domain that we own. They'll click through to those ads and know that they're finding exactly the page that they want to go to. Another thing that we have found historically is that, we can't 100% rely on organic search, right? So people are searching and they don't click on ads always, but they work in tandem. So, the more reliable Google is able to consider you from an organic standpoint, the better your paid ads will do, and vice versa.
So who would you, if you weren't paying for those branded keywords, who would be your competitors? Have you done any kind of analysis there?
We do have some competitors. It's interesting because there are a lot of businesses like, say, the Expedias and the booking.coms of the world who are running, lots of ads and things like that about stay near Disney or stay at a Disney hotel. They might be a partner of ours who are, they're not necessarily our, hotels and things like that, but they are bidding on our keywords in order to do that. The complexity of that is difficult to get into. There is an entire trademark protection program that I actually manage for the team across the entire business of Walt Disney Company in order to make sure that we're not internally competing with our internal partners and our good neighbor partners like the Expedias and the booking.coms in order to make sure that we're not driving up costs by competing within paid search.
Okay, so this is a new arena for me. I never thought about this, right? So I want to unpack this a little bit and see how I said we'd have an organic conversation. We did not plan for this at all, but this is really interesting to me. So your OTAs, we would call it, the online travel aggregators like Expedia, Priceline, all that. Those are your partners, good faith partners, and all. And of course, you'd both be bidding because, of course, if they come through to you, your profit margin's a bit higher. You don't have to share any of that. I understand that. So there are these dichotomous relationship, if you want to call it that. Right? How is the trademark part managed, though? As much as you can share, how do you manage that? Because you are essentially competing with your own partner. You are at some stage, at some point. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so without revealing all of our secrets, there are certain platforms that we utilize where we essentially monitor the entire internet for the usage of our registered trademarks. So say you're talking about the keyword Disney, right? So that's, say that's off limits, right? We're all talking theoretical here. Then we have rules set up with our marketing guidelines teams and our legal teams in order to have those partners sign contracts where we know that they will not be, bidding on a certain keywords. Now, of course, Google does not regulate keyword usage, right? They basically are hands off. They say, if it's your keyword, you tell people that you have a problem with it, we're not going to touch it. So we have all of these very elaborate plans drawn up where these are partners who they can bid on certain things that are relevant to their business, but not necessarily far and deep enough where they would, infringe upon us. And it's up to us. We have a whole team dedicated to just managing that and monitoring that to ensure that, we're not seeing cost driven up just because other people are showing up in the space.
So I have to ask. Could you give an example? Could you give me an example of, if you can, only if you can, one of those keywords that's off limits?
I would say Disney.
Okay, but anything that's a little bit of a long tail keyword that's off limits?
I wouldn't say we really have too many long tail keywords. When you get into long tail keywords, it tends to be much more specific. So at that point, those advertisers won't even touch that because they won't have a positive quality score. They don't have the ad copy, they don't have the domain, things like that, and they would be unsuccessful. So
since they can't really compete, they won't even try.
Exactly.
Understood. That's awesome. Hey, look, that's really, really cool. So we're talking quite detailed here and here, but I want to take a step back because I did promise some of my students that I would ask this question. So I want to know what your day-to-day activities are like as a CE Manager 3 and a CE Manager 2. What was your day-to-day activity like as a Manager 2 and now as Manager 3? What do you do as an SEM manager on a day-to-day basis?
That is an excellent question. What do I do? So as a CE Manager 2 on the team, I was very much hands in the campaigns, building the ads, managing from the ground up. So we would get, requests from our partners internally, our lines of business. Typically, the way that you start off with a paid search campaign is with an audience segment, right? So there's a particular audience that the business wants to reach. How do we reach this audience and what do we do? What channels do we use? If we determine that paid search is one of those that we want to use, we would do all the research. So we do keyword research, determining what is relevant to a particular, line of business, how much investment based on historical data, if we have any, or even just general search volume, search trends, estimations to see, do we have a space to play in here? Does it make sense? Paid search specifically is a demand capture platform, right? So it's not demand generation. We're not driving awareness. We're not driving anything like social would be or YouTube. We're reliant upon people searching for us. So our thought process when we go into it as, managers managing campaigns is how do we make ourselves present for people who might see an ad in social or something else, and they might say, let me Google this. They might Google it wrong, right? They might, search something completely unrelated that they remember but is not. But how can we capitalize on that to be there when they search, so we can arrive there? So I was doing a lot of that research and development part of it, essentially building the campaigns, making recommendations on the ad copy with our partners, things like that. As far as optimizations, you have to, think about the ways that is anyone infringing on us? Are we getting a lot of searches for, keywords that are irrelevant? Because as we know, Google has different match types. So they have exact match in paid search, where you can search exactly the phrase. They have phrase match, where you can append a word on it. And then they have broad match, which is a very interesting point of discussion with many search marketers.
Okay.
It's extremely broad, and it's much more expensive versus exact match, things like that. So a lot of marketers don't like to use it, just because it drives costs up and it brings in a lot of, for lack of a better word, junk searches. So it's a process of determining, like, what do we use? How do we use it? Is that going to drive up our costs? Are we going to stay efficient? That kind of thing. And the other part of it is observing cost efficiencies. Are we actually going to reach a broad enough audience to make this worthwhile investing money into it? So those are some of the thought processes and decisions we would make at that level, and just thinking about building those campaigns on a daily basis. When not doing that, sometimes it would be, switching ads in and out, reporting, definitely. So partners want to hear how their investment is doing. Is the line of business successful? Are we meeting our goals? For Disney, a lot of times goals are, revenue, or, leads in terms of people signing up to attend various, events and things like that. Or for newsletters, that kind of stuff. So it really just depends on the line of business and what that goal is. But you're ultimately every day making sure your campaigns are working towards that goal. You're spending within a certain amount. It's not a free for all. You don't have just budget to throw left and right and do things with. It's a matter of very strategically achieving goals within regulations, and day-to-day management looks like that a lot. Now in my current role, I still do some of that, most of that, but I'm also working a lot on the strategic pieces. So trying to figure out how, for the team, what's serving our team as a larger basis. Are our reporting cadences good? Is there a way that we can better share with partners? How do we share on our side optimizations that we make in the campaigns in layman's terms, so we're able to get across to our strategy teams, share with them what we're doing, so they can in turn understand and give us back some, different things that we do. I do a lot of inputs with my team too. So new and upcoming programs and, lines of business, things like that. And my favorite, I work on a lot of secret projects. So those are super fun and exciting. Those are the projects that we work on that don't hit the public for many, many years in advance, because they're in planning stages. So lots of cool stuff I get to do in my job.
Wait. You can't just throw that. So secret projects still related to paid search?
Yes.
Secret project that is strategy levels secret project.
Correct.
So is it paid search, or is it secret project that's strategy level?
Nope, it's secret projects related to media in general. A lot of times I'll be involved if it's paid search. So we're talking about, strategizing on if, something new is released into the wild. Are we able to support it with paid search? Is paid search a key aspect of it? Things like that. Typically, paid search is a key function of anything that we release, because people, what is the first thing they do when they hear about something new? They Google it.
So tell me this. There's so many questions I have for you. Oh my God, I don't even know where to start. First things first, which of Walt Disney's assets do you manage, or do you look at?
Yeah, personally, at this point in time, I oversee Disneyland business. So, but I also touch on majority of the other businesses like Walt Disney World, Vacation Club, Cruise Line. I support the team wherever I can. So there's a lot of different things happening on the different pieces that I'm able to touch, which I'm very fortunate for.
Gotcha. Awesome. But Disney Plus, ESPN, those wouldn't be under your purview.
So those fall under, there are different factions within Disney. So we are Disney Parks Experiences and Products. So we essentially market everything related to parks, signature experiences, cruises, products, consumer packaged goods. Disney Plus falls under Disney Media and Distribution. So it's a little bit different. We work with them laterally, essentially. So they are partners of ours. We technically serve the same company, but they have different goals. They're Disney streaming. So they, we work cross-functionally with them on things like audiences, or, they have new release coming up. Is that going to impact, things that are happening in the parks, that kind of different thing. So that's really how we collaborate with them.
Gotcha. Now, first question, if you can share, what platform are you looking at mostly? Are you on Google Ads doing all of this, or do you have a separate, SEM rush type of thing that helps you do this?
Yeah, we're focusing on Google Ads. So that's usually we work directly in there. I know there's a lot of businesses that use things like SA360, things like that. That is an option, right? So a lot of businesses use like a management platform overall. And then a lot of businesses also work within, like the Google Ads directly or Bing Ads directly, depending on what your business goals are. And then a lot of that is impacted by bidding strategies, right? So are you using Google's bidding strategies? Are you using a third party, like say, Adobe or Marin or Kenshu? There are a lot of different ways that you can manipulate those based on, algorithms and based on the programs, things like that.
What keyword research tools do you use? Are you using stuff like SEMrush, or is it just Google Keyword Planner that you use?
For the most part, we're using Google Keyword Planner. It's usually a little bit of a narrower because we're not releasing things on keyword levels, very often. But I have used in past SEMrush and things like that, and I know it to be a great tool to use. So
you did drop a Bing ads. How often do you do that?
I feel like Bing it's present in everything that a search marketer does, right? Even if that means that you're 90% marketing in Google, you're probably still 10% marketing in Bing. It is fairly lucrative in terms of the type of line of business you're running. So if something like meetings and professional things tend to perform better in Microsoft than they do in Google, but Google holds the lion's share of search volume and just the lion's share presence overall. So a lot of the efficiencies are in Google. So, but Bing has interesting and new things, right? So from an industry standpoint, they have things like in-feed ads where it's uses images and it's a little bit more dynamic and more visually capturing things like that. So a lot of times we use that platform for those types of things, more native marketing.
Gotcha. I have to ask. So, would the cost per acquisition be cheaper in Bing, you would think?
I would probably not say so, no.
Would it comparable or even more expensive?
I think from my experience, and I can just share this overall, the businesses that I've ever worked on, I think it is more expensive personally. The inventory is lower and a lot of fewer people are searching there. And I think from my perspective, I think Bing is probably better suited to native advertising, right? So in-feed ads, anything more dynamic, that type of thing. Whereas like search itself functions from a cost-effective standpoint really well because of volume within Google.
Gotcha. Awesome. So a couple of more things, since you brought this up. How do you coordinate your efforts with people doing display ads, or is that within the same entity that you are part of? So are people doing display ads? Do they communicate with you in terms of how you're using the Google Display Network or a Google Ad Network? And second to that, how is there any coordination with the social media team?
Yeah, so we are factions within one team, right? So we have a digital media strategy team. There is a section of us that are SEO, a section that is search activation, a section social, programmatic. Display falls under the programmatic team. So while I don't physically touch it because we're focused on search, I would say we work cross-functionally. So every time there is, a program that we're working on, or even if we're reporting, those team members are part of our larger team. So we're discussing, how can those channels work together? If we also know that if you're running social and display, things like that, those are upper funnel tactics. So that will trickle down to us. So without them, search would not really be as successful as it is.
But from a theoretical kind of understanding, so that's what I have, theory. From my understanding and my knowledge, I can't help but think if it was all integrated, coordinated, then Google would have a lot more data points throughout the funnel to then provide algorithmic recommendations for better, a more optimized search engine results or display results. And now I'm guessing you have then we're working on two different account structures, one for display, one for search engine.
Yes, technically, because they're very different ad formats.
Okay.
So to run them together doesn't really make sense because the goals are very different. So
Okay.
they all feed off of the same algorithm. They all feed off of the same audience information, which is probably the one way that Google is able to connect across like search, display, YouTube, all of those different things is because their audiences are what are available to those of us who use the platform, no matter what ad format we're running. But what we've seen is that typically they're so different just on based on what the cost is and what we're able to do with them that they work better cross functionally as like their own physical own thing, but then we know that without them it's not going to work the correct way, right? So we definitely need that upper funnel influence from display ads, from streaming, from YouTube in order to drive search. And Google they do a lot of things that they don't explain to us very well, because they don't share those things. And I feel like that's, if you work in digital marketing, that's just one of the things that you have to accept.
Mm-hmm.
But they do a lot of studies, right? So probably one of the most useful studies I've seen recently has been a search lift study, which they run on the back end in YouTube. So if we're running YouTube, they're able to take a look at if this influences any kind of search lift on the paid search side. And typically we do see that. So when we're running media in tandem, search and YouTube, we'll typically see that, more people are searching, they've seen the content, they remember it, they search. So we definitely want to keep that collaboration going between the channels.
Gotcha. I have another follow-up. Since you mentioned that you're looking at parts, experience products, I want to talk about the product part a little bit. Do you do paid search on other marketplaces, meaning say an Amazon? Is that something that you've been doing? Is there paid search that's being used there, or is it just SEO that you guys use?
Yeah, no, it's pretty comprehensive as far as like, for example, we have businesses like, Shop Disney, like publishing, things like that. Those all function within multiple workspaces. So within Google, within Amazon, those tend to lean a little bit more e-commerce. So because of that, Amazon is a platform you absolutely have to use. You know what I mean? Things like that. So we do touch a few different platforms rather than just Google, but Google tends to be the biggest one.
Okay. And then back to what you were saying, you worked on when you were with Worldwide, you were working with Target and all that. I'm guessing that's not of importance to Disney yet.
Those are a bit different. That was specifically consumer packaged goods, and those were household laundry items. So those would make more sense from that perspective. Disney itself, we have our own platform for selling consumer packaged goods, so we tends to stay pretty in-house.
Got it. Awesome. A slight departure from our line of questioning, maybe a refresher for our audience as well. Have you been to the secret tunnels?
That is a great question. So I actually have not been to the secret tunnels, and it is one of the things that makes me so sad. They were closed when I started because of COVID. But that is on my bucket list to do this year. So I can pretty much go anytime I would like to go. I just need to make time to do
it. But they obviously exist. We're not.
They do exist.
So here's another thing. So being a marketeer, let's talk a little bit more about the consumer behavior side, right? So we've heard rumors time and again, but I never have had anybody verify. And I don't know if you can. But anyway, when I'm on Main Street, probably about 100 yards away from an ice cream shop or a coffee shop, I think you know where I'm going with this. I can still smell it. Is this sensory marketing being used, and is that overt knowledge that you guys have?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
I kind of figured that's what you would say. Okay, one more nerdy comment, then we'll go broad again. Who writes your ad copies? Who writes those headlines and descriptions? Who does that, and what's the process of saying, hey, this is good, this is not, change this? What's that process?
Yeah, so we have a really organized system, actually, the most organized of any business that I've actually worked on within digital marketing. We have a strategy team who are, they're in park, they're doing research, they have all of the goals and business agendas and things like that. They're the ones who pretty much implement what needs to go into market as far as like, we have a say we have something coming up for Disneyland, right? Like nighttime spectaculars or something like that. They're the ones who say, well, we need to put this copy in market. They work with our planning and messaging teams in order to develop that. And that goes through multiple levels of legal review and all of those different things. And then the finalized copy is sent over to us to implement. So it's because it's Disney, it's has a lot of legalities and nuances that we have to work with. But other times I have worked with teams where I've written the ad copy, and basically someone on the team says, hey, that looks good, and we'll put it in. But honestly, the more you have at stake, the more you'll probably have a lot of legal reviews and people who are providing that to you rather than you doing it on the fly.
At you were doing it too.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
At Pearson, you were doing it.
Correct. Yeah.
But there was some system of getting it approved, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah. You usually have to integrate with a planning team or some type of strategy team in order to make sure that it aligns with the business goals and what we want to share about the particular product or program, things like that.
But then so I want to ask this a bit in details to get these, maybe bid amount or ad copies or headlines approved from, like, let's say for a company like Pearson. How far up the ladder do you go?
I would say it's not really how far up the ladder you go, but more of like how you present it, right? So you can present to one level above you, but if you are coming from a strategic perspective, like for in-paid search, right? When we're recommending ad copy for anything that you do, as long as it aligns well with the keywords you're bidding on, the content on the web page itself, then you can pretty much make a justification for this. It makes sense to put it in market, right? So sometimes you don't necessarily have to go super high up the ladder because it makes total sense. Or sometimes you might want to add in something unique and different, right? Like maybe you're talking about, say, food and dining, but you're putting a specific food name into the ad. That might be something that you might want to push up a little further up the line to see if does that actually make sense from a business perspective. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
But then same question for when you were working with a client in a consulting role at
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing all of those have to be approved by the client.
Yes.
Or someone in the client.
Typically everything ad copy, everything visible to the consumer has to be approved at some point by a partner or a client, just overall in general.
Two more questions that's nerdy, and then we'll go broad. I promise. I can't help but I have to ask, because this is one of those things, and for my students listening, this is one of the things that I cannot tell you because I don't have the data. But that reporting bit, making sure everything is understandable in layman's terms, the monitoring is so important, so important, obviously, right? First question, how frequently do you monitor your campaigns?
That is easy, every day. Yeah, I would say every day.
Same case at when you're working for a client, every day.
Yes. I think in paid search, it's really important, especially when you scale campaigns, right? So like the majority of businesses that I have worked on, their investment has been in the millions, right? So you're working with large amounts of fundings and investment there. And that can change because search is a demand capture platform, right? So if, on Tuesday, we have, not a lot of people looking for Disney vacations, for example. But on a Wednesday, everybody might be looking for Disney vacations. So you'll have to monitor that fluctuation to see where the demand is, because that means your investment can spike. And if you're working with campaigns with such big investment, that means it can spike in the thousands in one single day. So in order to make sure that you're looking at it and we're not just spending money to spend money, but actually spending and seeing a return from that spike in order to meet that demand, it's really, really important to, keep an eye on it on a daily basis. And there are lots of dashboards and tools and things that you can use in order to make sure you're looking at it from a high level perspective. But you just want to make sure that you're always, in tune with your campaigns. And it's funny to say that because as a marketer, you get to know your campaigns. They almost become like a friend, which is funny because my team will tell me this anytime I onboard someone new. They're like, you talk about your campaigns like they're actual people. And it's like, because you know how they behave, you learn their behaviors, they see, how they behave during the week or at the end of a month. If you change, rules or bids or any kinds of things, you can pretty much estimate once you get to know them, what kind of behavior you're going to see. So.
And I have no experience on millions of dollars on ads and all that, but from whenever I've run it for my clients, for some reason you have this unhealthy, or at least I have this unhealthy obsession with looking at those numbers every so often, just waiting on your dashboard. I'm like, okay, is that hitting? How many searches? All that. I can't get over that still. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to ask you was what your position goal entails, but also what the basics of Disney's goals and objective with SEM are. But I think we covered a whole lot of that.
Okay.
I want to go broad now. I
Okay.
want to go broad. What are the best practices that you're seeing in SEM these days? What are some of the things that you think people are doing really well, or that your team's doing really well from a high 30,000 foot perspective? If you could share some of those insights with us.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things about search or SEM in general is that the industry is constantly changing, right? So there's always some, new platform to use, new ad format to try, or even down to the granular level of like Google with their match types. They often change a lot of things there. So one of the things that we do really well on my team, and I'm really grateful for this, is that we do a lot of testing, right? So we are able to, identify a certain area within the line of business where we can test something new, like whether that is, an ad with a certain overlay, or if we can test a new bidding type or a new match type, things like that. And that really helps you to be successful in SEM because yes, you can run things status quo. You can say exact match keywords have worked for me in the traditional sense forever. That will serve you just fine, but it'll never allow you to scale and adapt your campaigns into something better, something more efficient, or maybe you're able to show up on a different place in a different part of the network, that kind of thing. So I would say a best practice is definitely to be able to think about like how can you take the next step in order to grow your campaigns and really be able to expand upon what's given to you. You don't want to, everything Google tells you, you don't want to say, yeah, that's a great idea, but you do want to take it back and you want to explore it on your own, right? Like, how will this serve us? Things like they're always coming up with new ways recently on how we're able to capture things like first party data, because cookies will be, deprecated pretty soon. So how are we able to do that? All those different things, being able to keep up with search industry updates and really make cases for, can we test this? How can we do that? Well, that's the best practice I would say, is just like flat across all lines of business.
I have to ask because this has been haunting me too, especially from a teaching perspective. So the thing is, the problem I have, and students, you probably have heard this 1,000 times from me say it. Google keeps changing their stuff, and for a teacher, I have to be constantly aware of what's going on, all the updates, and the slow deprecation of the use of cookies haunts me. Um, what is the solution? Like, so from what you said, how can you capture first person? What is Google saying?
Google's not saying much, let's put it that way. So essentially they're taking one form of hidden capture and transforming it into another variation of it. I think what's interesting is that before, cookies would really just not, there's no niche for it, right? So your cookies, if people are visiting websites, you're capturing it, that's fine. Now a lot of it looks like it's going to shift to rely on people being signed into platforms, right? So like, for example, you're signed into Google Chrome or something like that. That then allows you to be tracked by your behavior, your searches, your things like that. I think a lot of it is probably going to shift in that manner. As to how, I don't want to say, don't want to speculate, because we have certain things like, like Apple, for example, you now have the option not to be tracked across apps and things like that. So I think a lot of it will be user volunteered information, as well as signed in behaviors that maybe you're not thinking that you're doing while you're actually signed in doing something.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and that I'm going to be honest, that thought as a marketer scares me, as to not being able to, because I see it from a privacy perspective, I do.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone that turns the ad block off just so I can see what ads are out there, it kind of scares me. Anyway, all right. So going back to the big picture again, um, how do you see voice search influencing this industry? Could there be, or is there, first of all, if that I'm not, like one that I'm not aware of, is there a paid search in voice? Or what could there be in the future? How do you see voice search happening?
Yeah, so this is actually an ongoing discussion, right? So there's a lot of thought around voice search. As someone who has like Google Homes in my house, I do a lot of voice search myself. One of the things that we've talked about, especially with Google, is that I think the statistic is that 34% of searches on a daily basis are brand new, never heard of before. And a lot of that is attributed to voice search, because when people say things in accents, in dialects, in, you know, broken languages, you know, things like that, it might be asking the same thing, but it's coming out completely different. Google registers that as all different searches there. So one of the ways that we're able to work on the SEM side is, I think that's the argument that's made a lot for broad match, right? So you're able to have one key keyword, and once that keyword is coming in, whether or not that's accompanied by 5 different other words, then that you're still able to capture that, right? So you're really looking from a broader perspective at that point in order to capture that question, which when typed in might actually be just like 2 keywords, right? So I think that's a solution a lot of times that we hear from them, is that you need to broaden your scope from your keyword perspective in order to capture those things like voice search. However, there's not really regulations that can be put on it in order to keep cost efficiencies. Because if someone's searching, like, for example, somebody searching for Disney, they might not be searching the physical keyword Disney, but they might be saying like, I had a great time going to Disney last year. I want to do this, you know what I mean? And it's totally unrelated. We get a lot of charges and things like that, you know, so definitely ongoing. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done just in terms of refining that, because I know with algorithmic learning too, if there is a way to pare down those voice searches into the key keywords based on whether that's intonations or whether that's questions or certain things, I think that will be useful in the future.
So this would be one of those times where a computer scientist and a linguist can come together and figure stuff out. That's
exactly
cool.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So coming down to the final bits, I want to ask you this: if you could give some tips to some of my students who are digital marketing focused, or they're taking this class, to have a successful career in digital marketing, what would be some of the things that you could recommend?
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. I wish someone had asked, you know, me that question when I was in college. I think it's not an industry you can prepare for with a degree, right? So you are able to get take digital marketing classes. You can now get digital marketing degrees. The practical piece of it that you will do outside of the class, to your point, you know, just about the fact that a lot of it is theory when you're studying it, there's not a lot of that happens at the school level. So I would say you'll want to, if you're interested in it, you'll want to go out and get your Google Ads certification. You'll want to get your Microsoft certification. Put your hands into it, right? Learning the practicality of it. It's very different on a day-to-day managing campaigns or learning how to do that versus learning the theory of how, you know, digital marketing works. It does go together. It is very important to blend the two. You need to understand the theory in order to understand the practical piece of it. But a lot of times it's lacking in what we can practice and what you can put your hands on, because, you know, professors and, you know, different people don't have, you know, $10,000 to invest in this campaign for you to mess around and see how it goes. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So we definitely, you know, don't want to waste money in that way. But if there is a way for you to, you know, learn more and get those certifications, definitely do that. I think also a great way to prepare is just to keep up with the industry in general. So for example, like Search Engine Land has really, really great just information in general about like industry updates on SEO, SEM, the way that the landscape is changing, all of those different things. That's really important. And then I'd probably say another best practice to, you know, like get ready for it is just in general, keeping abreast of like what is happening in the world, right? Because consumer trends don't happen unless they're impacted by what's happening in the world around us. We learned that in COVID big time, right? So, you know, people were in their homes, all of a sudden they started buying more laundry products, they started buying more pajamas, they started doing those kinds of things. Now, when we're out of that, a lot of times people are looking for new things to do, travel, vacation, ways to get out of their house. So whatever is happening in the world around you is likely happening within your industry that you're working in as a digital marketer. So being informed and getting some practical experience is great there. And just also probably just a lot of general focus as well, because you will be working with a lot of numbers, a lot more numbers than you think you will be working with. It's not all pretty content, videos and pictures and things like that. An analytical base is a really, really strong way to do it. So if you have some great Excel experience and want to learn more about that, that will go a long way too.
That's awesome. Well, I've kept you for so long. Thank you so much for your time.
For sure, anytime.
Um, uh, would it be okay if I shared your LinkedIn profile with the students?
Sure, no problem.
It's going to come somewhere down here. I'm going to put that in later. But thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you for talking to us about so many different things. Oh my goodness, we talked about a lot of stuff. And yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here.
That's awesome. Students, catch you on the next Coffee with Casey.